Lieutenant James Chen stood at his post aboard the Earth's first interstellar embassy ship, the ESS Harmony, trying not to stare at the strange alien delegates walking past. After 5 years of service in diplomatic security, he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. The Lumini were unlike any species humanity had encountered before. Their bodies were made entirely of living crystal, transparent enough to see through, yet complex enough to support life. They moved with a grace that made their crystalline forms sing with soft, beautiful tones, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. James adjusted his sonic dampener collar, a required device for all humans working near the Lumini. A single shout could cause serious harm to their delicate crystalline bodies. As he watched the procession, a particular figure caught his attention. Princess Cathera of the Lumini royal house was different from her companions. While they were clear as glass, she had a slight purple tint to her crystalline form that caught the light in mesmerizing ways. Unlike human royalty who wore crowns, she had naturally forming crystal spikes arranged in a circular pattern above her head. Through her transparent body, James could see the complex network of energy pathways that served as her nervous system, pulsing with a soft light. "Human guard," she said, her voice creating musical tones that the ship's universal translator converted to English. "Your species fascinates me. You are so solid." She moved closer to James, her crystal feet creating gentle chimes against the metal floor. James bowed slightly, remembering his diplomatic training. "Your Highness, I'm Lieutenant James Chen of Earth's Diplomatic Security Force." "Lieutenant," she said, breaking the word into distinct musical notes. "Your language is as solid as your form. We Lumini prefer sounds that flow like light through crystal." She demonstrated by speaking her name in her native tongue. A series of beautiful chimes and rings that made the air itself seem to sparkle. As they talked, James noticed other Lumini delegates watching them with what he assumed was disapproval. It was hard to read expressions on faces made of crystal. The princess either didn't notice or didn't care. "Tell me, Lieutenant," she said, "is it true that humans cannot share consciousness through resonance? How do you connect with each other?" James shifted uncomfortably. "We communicate through words and actions, Your Highness. Our consciousness stays within our own bodies." Farah made a sound like tinkling glass, her species' equivalent of laughter. "How limiting. No wonder your species builds so many walls and boundaries. We Lumini can merge our consciousness with those we trust, sharing thoughts and memories directly." Before James could respond, a senior diplomatic official approached. "Your Highness, the Council is waiting." Farah's crystal form dimmed slightly, apparently their equivalent of a frown. "Duty calls, Lieutenant, but I hope we can continue this discussion. Your solid world intrigues me." She moved away, her crystal body creating a subtle rainbow effect under the ship's lights. James watched her join the other delegates, noticed how they clustered around her protectively. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wouldn't be their last interaction. There was something about her genuine curiosity about humans that seemed different from the other Lumini's formal politeness. As the procession disappeared around a corner, their chiming footsteps fading away, James allowed himself a small smile. 5 years in diplomatic security, and he'd never had a conversation quite like that. He had a feeling his job was about to become much more interesting. What he didn't know then was just how right he was, and that within 24 hours, he would be running through these same corridors with the princess in his arms, trying to save her life. The next day started like any other aboard the ESS Harmony. James stood at attention during a morning diplomatic ceremony, watching Princess Cathera and her fellow Lumini delegates walk down the grand corridor. Their crystalline bodies created a symphony of soft chimes with each step. Something felt wrong. James couldn't explain it, but 15 years of security work had taught him to trust his instincts. He scanned the crowd more carefully, noting how some of the Lumini delegates seemed to be moving away from the main group. The princess was speaking to the Earth ambassador when James noticed it, a slight vibration in the floor plates. Most humans wouldn't have felt it, but his security training had taught him to be sensitive to unusual vibrations. They could be the first sign-off. The attack came without warning. A high-pitched whine filled the air, and 3 Lumini delegates suddenly shattered into thousands of crystal shards. Screams erupted from both humans and Lumini as more sonic weapons activated. "Separatists!" someone shouted. James was already moving. He sprinted toward Princess Cthera, who stood frozen in shock. Through her transparent body, he could see her energy pathways flickering in fear. The sonic weapons were specifically designed to shatter Lumini bodies. "Your Highness, get down." James tackled her just as a sonic blast passed through the space where she had been standing. The blast hit a decorative crystal wall behind them, shattering it instantly. "Lieutenant Chen." Thera's voice chimed in confusion as he pulled her behind a metal column. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his sonic dampener collar working overtime to protect her from even his voice. "The metal will help block the sonic attacks." More Lumini shattered around them. James could see the attackers now, a group of Lumini with dark, almost black crystal bodies. Their own sonic dampeners had been modified to become weapons. "We must reach the safe room," Cthera said, her voice creating worried musical notes. "But they're between us and the main security doors." James quickly assessed their options. The main route was blocked. The maintenance tunnels would be too loud for Lumini to walk through undetected. Then he had an idea. "Your Highness, do you trust me? You saved my life moments ago." "Yes, I trust you." "Then I need to carry you. Your crystal feet will make too much noise on the metal floors." Without waiting for a response, James scooped her up. Her crystalline form was surprisingly light, but he had to be careful. One wrong move could crack her delicate body. They moved through the chaos as more sonic blasts filled the air. James kept his body between the princess and any potential attacks, using his sonic dampener collar to provide her additional protection. "The maintenance tunnel is 30 meters ahead," he whispered. "Once we're inside, the metal walls will block their sonic weapons." Thera's crystal body hummed with tension. "Lieutenant, behind us." James spun around to see a black crystal separatist aiming a sonic device at them. In that split second, he made a decision that went against all his training. He threw his sonic dampener collar at the attacker. The collar exploded in a burst of counter-frequencies, temporarily disorienting the separatist. James used that moment to sprint the final distance to the maintenance tunnel entrance. "Hold tight," he said, pulling open the heavy door with one hand while holding her with the other. They slipped inside just as more sonic blasts hit the door behind them. In the dim light of the maintenance tunnel, Cthera's crystal body cast soft purple reflections on the metal walls. "You removed your sonic dampener," she said, her voice full of concern. "Even speaking near me could cause damage now." James nodded, carefully setting her down. "Then we'll have to be very quiet," he whispered, as faint sounds of chaos still echoed from beyond the door. "This way, Your Highness. And stay close. We're not safe yet." The maintenance tunnels of ESS Harmony were a maze of metal corridors lit by dim emergency lights. James led Princess Cthera carefully. One hand held behind him for her to follow, the other pressed against the wall to guide their way. Without his sonic dampener collar, he had to be extremely careful. Even a whisper too loud could damage her crystalline form. Through her transparent body, James could see her energy pathways pulsing faster than normal, the Lumini equivalent of a racing heart. She was scared, but trying hard not to show it. A loud bang echoed through the tunnels, making Cthera's crystal body vibrate dangerously. The separatists had breached the maintenance tunnel entrance. James quickly pulled the princess into a small alcove, pressing his back against the wall and holding her close to shield her from any sonic attacks. "Lieutenant," she chimed very softly, her musical voice barely audible. "My body's resonance might give away our position." She was right. Every time she moved, her crystal form made tiny sounds, beautiful but dangerous in their situation. James thought quickly. then pulled off his uniform jacket. With slow, careful movements, he wrapped it around her crystalline body, using the fabric to dampen her natural chimes. More footsteps echoed through the tunnels, accompanied by the distinct sound of crystal feet on metal. The separatists were getting closer. James knew they needed to move, but every step Kythera took would make noise. Making a quick decision, he carefully lifted her again, using his jacket as a buffer between them. She was lighter than before. Fear had changed her crystal density, making her more fragile. He would have to be even more careful. They moved through the tunnels as quietly as possible. James stepped carefully, making sure his boots didn't create echoes. Years of security training had taught him how to move silently, but never had it been so crucial. Through an intersection ahead, they could see the soft blue glow of the ship's crystal garden, a special area designed for the Lumini delegates. If they could reach it, the crystal structures would help hide Kythera's resonance. Suddenly, voices echoed from a nearby tunnel. "Check that corridor." The princess's resonance signature was detected in this section. James felt Kythera tense in his arms. Her crystal body began to hum with fear, a sound that would surely give them away. Without thinking, he pressed his hand gently against her crystal face, using his skin to dampen the sound. Her energy pathways flashed with surprise at his touch, then settled into a calmer pattern. She understood. They needed absolute silence. With agonizing slowness, James carried her past the intersection. Each step had to be perfect. One wrong move, one scrape of his boot, and the separatists would find them. They were almost to the garden when a beam of light swept across the tunnel behind them. James pressed them both into a shadow, holding his breath. The light passed by without finding them. Finally, they reached the garden entrance. James typed in his security code with one hand, still carrying Kythera with the other. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the crystal garden was a forest of geometric shapes and glowing formations. James carefully set Kythera down among similar purple-tinted crystals, where her natural resonance would blend in with the garden's ambient sounds. "We should be safer here," he whispered, barely breathing the words. "The garden's crystals will mask your presence." Kythera's energy pathways pulsed with what he had learned to recognize as relief. She reached out and touched his hand, sending a tiny harmonic vibration through his skin. A gesture of thanks that didn't require sound. But their moment of relief was short-lived. From somewhere in the garden came the unmistakable sound of crystal feet on crystal paths. They weren't alone. James pulled Kythera deeper into the crystal garden, where massive formations created natural hiding spots. The artificial lights above made the crystals glow softly, casting colorful shadows all around them. It was beautiful, but also dangerous. Each shadow could hide a separatist. They found a small cave formed by overlapping crystal structures. James helped Kythera inside, then positioned himself at the entrance. Through the translucent walls, they could see distorted shapes moving through the garden. 3 of them, James whispered so quietly it was barely a breath. "They're spreading out to search." Kythera's energy pathways flickered with an idea. She touched James's arm to get his attention, then pointed at the crystal walls around them. Her body's natural light pulsed in a pattern he didn't understand. "I don't." He started to whisper, but she pressed a crystalline finger to his lips, silencing him. Very carefully, she placed her hand against the crystal wall. Her energy pathways connected with the crystal structure, sending pulses of light through it. James watched in amazement as the light spread through the garden's crystal formations, subtly changing their color and structure. "The garden is alive," she explained in the faintest chime. "All crystal formations are connected. I can reshape them, but it takes time." James understood. She needed him to protect her while she worked. He positioned himself better at the cave entrance, ready to act if the separatists came too close. Through gaps in the crystal walls, he watched the separatists searching. Their dark crystal bodies absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making them look like moving shadows. They carried sonic weapons modified from dampener collars. sweeping them back and forth. Behind him, Thera continued her work. The crystal walls were slowly shifting, growing thicker, creating better protection. But the movement and restructuring created tiny sounds, beautiful chimes that seemed very loud in the quiet garden. One of the separatists turned toward their hiding spot. James tensed, ready to fight if needed. Without his sonic dampener collar, he couldn't risk calling for help. His voice could hurt Thera worse than the separatists could. The dark crystal figure moved closer, following the sound. Thera's energy pathways pulsed faster as she worked, trying to finish before they were discovered. James could feel the crystal floor shifting slightly under his feet as she reformed it. The separatist was only meters away now. Suddenly, Thera grabbed James's arm and pulled him down. The crystal cave collapsed around them, but instead of crushing them, it reformed into a small chamber deeper underground. The entrance sealed seamlessly, leaving them in a space lit only by Thera's glowing energy pathways. "We're safe here," she chimed softly. "The separatists cannot detect my resonance through these modified crystals." James looked around the small chamber in amazement. The walls were smooth and slightly curved, and seemed to absorb any echoes. "This is incredible," he whispered. "This is how my people originally lived, in crystal chambers we shaped ourselves." Her pathways pulsed with pride, then dimmed slightly. "Lieutenant, I must thank you properly for saving my life." "No thanks needed, Your Highness. It's my job. Among my people, when someone saves a life, it creates a deep bond." She hesitated, her crystal form shimmering with nervousness. "The proper thanks is to share consciousness, to let the Savior exist within the saved one's crystal matrix." James blinked in surprise. "Exist within?" "Yes," she chimed. "To be inside me, so we may share thoughts and memories. It is our highest form of trust and gratitude." Before James could respond, they heard sonic weapons discharging above them. The separatists were getting frustrated, destroying crystal formations in their search. "We can discuss proper thanks later," James whispered. "Right now, we need to figure out how to stop them before they destroy this entire garden." Thera nodded, but her pathways still pulsed with unspoken thoughts. This conversation wasn't over. It was just delayed. In the crystal chamber beneath the garden, James and Thera sat in silence for several minutes, listening to the separatists searching above them. The only light came from Thera's pulsing energy pathways, casting soft purple shadows on the walls. "They're moving away," James whispered finally, hearing the footsteps grow distant. "But we can't stay here forever." Thera's crystal form shimmered as she spoke. "No, but we are safe for now. Perhaps we can use this time to understand each other better." She paused, her pathways flickering with curiosity. "Why did you wrap your jacket around me earlier?" "To dampen your resonance," James explained. "To keep you quiet." The princess made a sound like tinkling glass, her version of laughter. "Humans are so creative. We Lumini would never think to use cloth that way. We solve problems with crystal and resonance, not physical things." "Speaking of resonance," James said carefully, "about what you mentioned before, about me being inside you." "Yes," her pathways brightened with enthusiasm. "It is our highest form of thanks. When one Lumini saves another's life, they share consciousness through crystal resonance. The saved one allows the Savior to exist within their crystal matrix, sharing all thoughts and memories." James shifted uncomfortably. "That sounds very intimate." "Intimate." Thera's crystal form tilted in confusion. "I do not understand this word in this context. Our universal translators suggest it means close or personal. But is there another meaning?" James felt his face grow warm. In human culture, being inside someone has a different, meaning. A physical meaning. Thera's energy pathways pulsed rapidly as she processed this. "Oh." Her crystal form suddenly turned a deeper shade of purple, apparently the Lumini version of blushing. No, not physical at all. Only consciousness. Only thoughts." She made the tinkling laugh sound again, but higher pitched with embarrassment. Their awkward moment was interrupted by a loud crash from above. Both fell silent, listening intently. "They're destroying more of the garden," Thera whispered, her pathways dimming with sadness. "Each crystal formation they shatter is like, how do humans say it? Like killing a small part of our history." James watched her energy pathways pulse with sorrow. "You really can feel the crystals, can't you? They're not just rocks to you. No more than your flesh is just meat to you," she chimed softly. "We are crystal-given consciousness. Every formation holds memories, songs, stories." She touched the wall of their chamber. "This garden was a gift from my people to yours. Each crystal was grown with memories of our worlds meeting for the first time." James found himself reaching out to touch the crystal wall too. Under his fingers, it felt warm, almost alive. "I never knew. To us, they were just beautiful decorations. That is why the Separatists attack here," Cthera explained. "They believe sharing our crystal memories with other species makes us weak. They want to keep our consciousness pure, unchanged by outside thoughts." Another crash from above made them both jump. Thera's pathways flickered with fear. "These crystal formations," James said thoughtfully, "can you use them to fight back? Like you did to create this chamber?" Thera's crystal form brightened. "Yes, but," she dimmed again, "I would need to extend my consciousness through the entire garden. It would leave me very vulnerable. If they used their sonic weapons while I was connected to everything." "Then I'll protect you," James said firmly. "Like you said, we understand each other better now." She reached out and touched his hand, sending a small harmonic vibration through his skin. "When this is over, Lieutenant, I still wish to thank you properly. But first, let us save this garden, together." Above them, more crystal formations shattered. They were running out of time. "Are you ready?" James whispered, watching Cthera prepare herself. They were still in their crystal chamber beneath the garden, but now had a plan. "Almost," she chimed softly. Her energy pathways were glowing brighter than ever. "Remember, once I connect with the garden, I cannot move. You must protect my physical form." James nodded, checking the piece of crystal she had shaped into a makeshift shield for him. "And the resonance patterns?" "Yes. When I pulse purple, the crystal formations will be strong, safe to touch. When they turn red, stay away. They will shatter." She placed both hands on the chamber walls. "Beginning now." Thera's energy pathways suddenly flared brilliant purple. The light spread from her crystal body into the walls, then raced through every formation in the garden. Through the ceiling of their chamber, James could see the entire garden lighting up section by section. The Separatists noticed immediately. "Up there," one shouted. "The princess is connecting with the garden." "Now, Lieutenant," Cthera chimed, her voice trained with concentration. The chamber walls around them began to split apart, revealing the garden above. James moved quickly, positioning himself in front of Cthera with his crystal shield. The three Separatists were already aiming their sonic weapons. But Cthera was faster. Crystal formations suddenly grew and shifted, creating a maze of barriers. One Separatist fired, but his sonic blast hit a purple glowing crystal wall and bounced back, nearly hitting him. "She's controlling the entire garden," another Separatist shouted. "Spread out. Find her physical form." James watched in amazement as Cthera's consciousness moved through the garden. Crystal formations grew and shrank, changed angles, reflected sonic blasts back at the attackers. It was like watching someone play a complex musical instrument, but the music was made of light and crystal. One Separatist got too close. James rushed forward with his shield, deflecting a sonic blast and tackling the attacker. The dark crystal being shattered on impact, they were more fragile than Cthera's royal crystal form. "Two left," he whispered as he returned to Cthera. Her only response was to pulse the crystals brighter. Formations began growing from the floor, encircling one of the remaining Separatists. He fired his sonic weapon in panic, but in the enclosed space, the blast bounced back and shattered him. The last separatist seemed to realize he was beaten. He turned to run and found his path blocked by a wall of red glowing crystal. He fired anyway. The crystal shattered exactly as Thera had planned, the explosion of shards knocking the separatist down. Before he could recover, crystal formations grew around him like a cage. "It's over," James said, but Kythera didn't respond. Her energy pathways were flickering erratically. "Princess." "Too much connection," she chimed weakly. "Can't disconnect properly." James understood she was somehow trapped in the garden's crystal network. Without thinking, he reached out and touched her crystal face, hoping to give her something to focus on. The contact was like touching an electric current, but not painful. He felt a strange resonance pass between them, like hearing a distant song. Kythera's pathways pulsed once, twice, then stabilized. Her consciousness pulled back from the garden, crystal formations settling into their new shapes. She slumped forward, and James caught her carefully. "That was incredible," he said. "We did it together," she chimed softly. "You gave me an anchor when I was lost in the resonance." "How did you know to do that?" "I didn't," James admitted. "I just wanted to help." Thera's crystal form shimmered with what he now recognized as affection. "And that, Lieutenant, is why I must properly thank you. You understand us better than any human ever has." She paused, then added with a musical laugh, "Even if you did misunderstand what being inside meant." Above them, crystal formations chimed softly in the restored garden, creating a symphony of light and sound that celebrated their victory. After the battle in the Crystal Garden, security teams finally arrived to take the captured separatist away. Medical teams checked both James and Kythera, amazed to find them largely unharmed. The garden itself was damaged, but thanks to Kythera's control, not destroyed. Later, they sat in a quiet corner of the restored garden. Thera had insisted on a private conversation, away from the cleanup crews and investigation teams. "Lieutenant Chen," she began formally, her crystal form catching the light. "You have done more than just save my life. You understood our ways, protected our heritage, and even helped me when I was lost in the crystal resonance." James shook his head. "I was just doing my job, Your Highness." "No," she chimed firmly. "Another guard might have saved my life, yes. But you," her energy pathways pulsed with emotion, "you treated our crystal formations with respect. You understood they were alive. You even learned to feel their resonance." She was right, James realized. During the fight, he had started to sense which crystals were safe to touch, even before they changed color. Somehow, he had begun to understand their vibrations. "That's why I must properly thank you," Kythera continued. "Now that you understand what it truly means." James felt his face grow warm, remembering his earlier misunderstanding. "About that, I'm sorry for thinking." Thera's crystal form chimed with laughter. "Do not apologize. Your misunderstanding taught me much about humans. You think so, physically. Everything must have solid form, solid meaning. We Lumini think in resonance, in shared consciousness." She touched a nearby crystal formation, making it hum softly. "When we share consciousness, there is no physical contact, just understanding. Complete, pure understanding. Would you allow me to share this with you?" James hesitated. "Will it hurt?" "No. You will simply see through my eyes, feel what I feel, understand as I understand." Her pathways pulsed gently. "It is the greatest gift my people can give. What do I need to do? Just sit still and keep your mind open." And she made the tinkling laugh again. "Try not to think about the other meaning of being inside." James couldn't help laughing too. Then he took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." Kythera reached out and touched his temples with her crystal fingers. At first, nothing happened. Then, colors exploded in his mind. Not just colors, sounds, feelings, memories, all mixing together like a beautiful symphony. He could feel the resonance of every crystal in the garden, hear their songs, understand their stories. Through Cthulhu's consciousness, he saw how the Lumini perceived the world. Everything was connected by vibrations, by harmonies that humans couldn't normally detect. He saw memories of her childhood, growing up in crystal palaces that sang with the thoughts of generations. Most amazingly, he felt her emotions during their escape. Her fear, yes, but also her growing trust in him. Her fascination with how differently he saw the world. Her joy when he began to understand the crystals. The experience lasted only minutes, but when Cthulhu withdrew her touch, James felt forever changed. He struggled to find words. "Now you understand," she chimed softly. "This is how we thank those who save us, by sharing who we truly are." James looked around the garden with new eyes. Every crystal formation now seemed to sing to him, telling its own story. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Cthulhu's pathways pulsed with happiness. "And you, Lieutenant Chen, are the first human to ever truly understand it." Above them, the crystal garden chimed its own melody, a harmony of human understanding and Lumini tradition, creating something entirely new. 1 month after the Separatist attack, the ESS Harmony's crystal garden had been fully restored. In fact, it was more beautiful than ever, as Cthulhu had added new formations containing memories of recent events, including the story of a human who learned to understand crystal resonance. James stood in his dress uniform before the Lumini Human Cultural Exchange Council. Princess Cthulhu sat among her people, her purple-tinted crystal form easy to spot among the clear crystal bodies of other Lumini delegates. Lieutenant James Chen, the head of the council, spoke, his crystal form creating formal tones. "Your actions during the Separatist attack went far beyond the call of duty. Not only did you save Princess Cthulhu's life, but you also helped preserve priceless crystal formations containing our shared history." James stood at attention, trying not to smile as Cthulhu's energy pathways pulsed with barely contained excitement. She clearly knew something he didn't. The council leader continued, "But what truly sets you apart is what happened after. You are the first human to truly understand crystal resonance, to share consciousness with Illumini, to understand our way of life." Cthulhu stood, her crystal form catching the light beautifully. "Which is why I have a proposal for the council. Lieutenant Chen should become our first human Lumini cultural liaison." Murmurs, both human and crystal, filled the chamber. Cthulhu continued, "The Separatists attacked because they feared humans could never understand us. Lieutenant Chen proved them wrong. He learned our ways, respected our traditions, and even began to sense crystal resonance naturally." She turned to James. "After sharing consciousness, you understand us better than any human ever has. Will you help others understand too?" James looked around the chamber. The human diplomats were nodding encouragingly. The Lumini delegates' energy pathways were pulsing with approval. Even his security chief was giving him a thumbs up. "I would be honored," he said. But he smiled at Cthulhu. "We might need to work on the translation of certain terms, to avoid misunderstandings." Cthulhu's crystal form chimed with laughter, and to everyone's surprise, many other Lumini joined in. The story of James's misconception about being inside had apparently become a favorite among them, a perfect example of how different cultures could find humor in their mistakes and learn from them. The council leader's energy pathways brightened. "Then it is settled. Lieutenant Chen will serve as our cultural liaison, helping humans and Lumini better understand each other." After the ceremony, James and Cthulhu walked through the crystal garden. New security measures were in place, including modified sonic dampeners that protected the crystals while allowing them to resonate naturally. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" James asked. Cthulhu's pathways pulsed playfully. "Perhaps, or perhaps it was written in the resonance patterns. My people believe some connections are meant to be." "Speaking of connections," James said, touching a nearby crystal formation, "I can feel them more clearly now. Ever since we shared consciousness." "That is rare." Cthulhu chimed happily. Most non-Lumini never develop the ability. It proves what I told the council. You truly understand us. She touched the same crystal formation, and it lit up with stored memories. Images of their escape, their battle against the separatists, and their moment of shared consciousness. The garden will always remember, she said softly, how a human learned to hear crystal songs, and how two different peoples grew to understand each other better. James smiled, even if it started with a rather awkward misunderstanding. Especially because of that. Cthulhu laughed, her crystal form shimmering. Sometimes the best understanding comes from misunderstanding first. Above them, the crystal garden chimed its agreement, creating a harmony of human and Lumini sounds, a new song for a new chapter in their shared history.